Darkness hummed with the low, steady thrum of the ship's engine. The air was cold, metallic, and reeked faintly of ozone. Somewhere deep in the cargo hold, a scream echoed, high-pitched, sharp, and raw with terror. It wasn't human. The scream. Ronan Voss froze mid-step, his pulse quickening. He had been hired as a mechanic aboard the SS Erebos, a merchant freighter that claimed to haul minerals from the outer colonies. But this scream was no echo of metal groaning under pressure. It was a living sound, desperate and wild. He glanced around. No one else seemed to hear it. His shift had ended an hour ago, and most of the crew were either in the mess hall or asleep. The scream came again, a harsh, choked cry like a wounded animal. Ronan's feet moved before his brain could tell him otherwise. The cargo hold was dim, lit only by flickering orange emergency lights. His breath came in soft puffs of condensation as he approached the source of the sound. He passed crates marked with hazard symbols, barrels of refined ore, and sealed containers. Then, tucked between two massive metal storage pods, he saw it. Her. A cage no larger than a coffin sat, bolted to the deck. Inside was a girl, no older than 10, though she was clearly not human. Her skin shimmered in hues of deep blue and violet, bioluminescent veins glowing faintly beneath the surface. Her eyes, large and silver, locked onto him with a mixture of hope and terror. The girl in the cage. Ronan crouched, his heart thudding hard in his chest. "What? Who are you?" he whispered. His gaze swept over her. Thin arms, a frail frame, and faint bruises on her wrists where she had gripped the metal bars for too long. "Help," she rasped, her voice cracking as if it hadn't been used in days. "You speak English?" he asked, incredulous. Her head bobbed up and down rapidly. "Learn from you. Hear words. Help me." Ronan reached for the lock on the cage, but it was reinforced with a biometric scanner. He cursed under his breath. "Who put you in here?" Her eyes darted to the ceiling. "Hunters." His stomach sank. The SS Erebos wasn't a cargo ship. It was a poacher's vessel. And she was their prize. The choice. Ronan's hands trembled as he ran his fingers over the cage's lock. He knew how these ships operated. Every crewmate had a role, and every role was disposable. If he got caught, they wouldn't hesitate to space him. But then he met her eyes again. Those eyes. Wide, pleading, afraid. He gritted his teeth. "All right, kid. I'm getting you out of here." Using his toolkit, Ronan slid out a small multi-wrench, one with a signal disruptor built in. It wouldn't fool a security drone, but for a small cage scanner, it might work. He positioned it over the biometric lock, watching as it blinked red, then yellow, then green. The lock clicked open. The girl hesitated, staring at him like she couldn't believe it was real. "Go," he said, waving her forward. "Before someone sees us." She crawled out slowly, wincing with every movement. Her legs shook as she stood, unsteady but free. "Name," she said, tilting her head at him. "You?" "Ronan," he replied, glancing toward the bulkhead door. "We gotta move fast." "Ronan," she repeated slowly, her silver eyes softening. "I am Yara." The pursuit. The alarm blared just as they reached the corridor. Red lights spun in violent circles along the ceiling. "Escape detected." "Escape detected," the ship's AI droned. "Damn it," Ronan hissed. "They know." He grabbed Yara's hand, and she squeezed it tight. Her skin was cold but soft, like wet silk. Boots pounded on metal floors, distant but closing in. "Crew deck is a dead end," he muttered, glancing around. The docking bay was too far, and there was no guarantee they'd make it. His eyes darted to a vent overhead. "Think you can fit?" he asked, pointing. Yara nodded and leapt, with an agility that surprised him. She climbed into the vent, twisting her body like a serpent. Ronan pulled himself up behind her. He was larger, and it took him several grunts and curses to wedge himself inside. "Move," he whispered, shoving himself forward. Quietly, the sound of boots passed below them, voices shouting orders. The trap. They crawled for what felt like hours. Ronan's arms ached, his breath shallow in the tight space. But Yara moved with quiet precision, her silver eyes glowing just ahead like tiny lanterns. Then she stopped. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "Listen," she replied. A faint hum resonated from the vent walls. Not the hum of the ship's engines. Something else. "EMP charge," she said, her face tight with fear. Ronan's blood ran cold. They had tripped a sensor, and the ship's defense system was charging an EMP to flush them out. "We have to drop," he said. "Now." Yara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. She pressed her hand against the vent's side wall, her fingers glowing softly as she traced a line in the metal. The metal hissed, steaming, and then it melted. His jaw dropped. "You could do that this whole time?" Yara glanced back, her eyes narrowed. "Did not trust you." "Fair," he muttered. They dropped into a maintenance corridor, metal clangs echoing through the ship. Ronan felt the air pressure change. A docking bay was nearby. "Follow me," he barked, running. Yara followed, her small feet tapping lightly on the deck. The stand. They reached the docking bay just as the ship's blast doors began to close. A small shuttle sat on the platform, its hatch open. "Go, Yara," he shouted, grabbing her arm and pushing her forward. She dashed up the ramp, turning to look back at him. "Come, Ronan," she called. He glanced behind him. The crew had arrived. 6 men with rifles raised. "Stop right there, Voss," the captain snarled. "You don't know what she is." "Yeah, I do," Ronan said, locking eyes with Yara. "She's alive." He sprinted for the shuttle. Bullets ricocheted off the metal walls. A sharp pain lanced through his arm, but he didn't stop. He dove into the shuttle, hitting the ground hard. "Launch it," he groaned. "Launch it now." Yara's small hands hovered over the control panel, her fingers glowing as she touched it. The shuttle hummed to life. "AI access granted," the ship's voice echoed. The blast doors were nearly closed, but the shuttle's thrusters kicked, and with a roar of fire and speed, they slipped through, the edges of the bay door grazing the shuttle's hull. The starless sky. Ronan lay on the floor, panting, his arm bleeding. Yara knelt beside him, her small hands glowing over his wound. Warmth spread through him as her light pulsed into his flesh, the pain fading. "You can heal?" he asked, wincing. "Learn from you," she said softly. Her silver eyes met his. "Learn to trust." He let out a short laugh. "Lucky me." The ship floated silently in the vastness of space. Stars glittered beyond the viewport like grains of sand on an endless black beach. "Where now?" Yara asked, gazing at the stars. Ronan sat up slowly, his gaze fixed on the infinite horizon. "Anywhere but back there, kid." Yara smiled. Her bioluminescence glowed brighter. "Anywhere," she repeated, gazing at the stars. And for the first time in his life, Ronan believed it.